Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today I am out of town, so we are not having Friday reads, but I am pre-recording this little look at some books that are my most anticipated upcoming new releases. Now, I know a lot of people did a video like this back in January, but I have just now managed to wrap my head around the concept now that we're at the end of February. And a couple of these books are actually coming out next week. I suddenly have my wits about me, maybe, and I'm ready to talk about these books. I think I have maybe 10, I don't know, we'll see. Books that are coming out between next week, and I think the latest, the farthest one out is around the beginning of September. There may be some books that I'm going to be really excited about that I just don't know about at this time, or the release date hasn't yet been announced, or it's later in the year past the beginning of September. So I'm sure that there are more. And the other funny thing is sometimes you're so greatly anticipating a book, and then when it finally comes out, you take months and months or 2 or 3 years and before you ever read it. So that could happen too. But as we stand here today, these are the ones that I am the most fired up about. And you may have heard of some of these already, but maybe there's something in here that you haven't yet heard of, or you're still wondering if you're going to read it. So I would love to hear from these ones that I'm talking about, which ones do you also want to read? And then are there some other ones that you are anticipating the most? Let me know in the comments so I can add them to my list as well. And I'm going to do these in release date order. So starting with the ones that are coming up the soonest and then moving ahead. So let's see. I have a little cheat sheet over here. On February 27th, there are 2 books coming out. The first one is the sequel to Moon of the Crusted Snow, and it's called Moon of the Turning Leaves by Waubgeshig. This is a Canadian Indigenous author. I read this book late last year, probably in December. I think I read it in November. And I loved this book. It was up in my top books of the year. It was up in my top apocalyptic books of the year, because that was a whole list. And the sequel was already out at that time. This one's kind of a weird case because the sequel was released in the UK and I guess in Canada, but only in paperback, and it was a really high price. It was something like a $30 paperback, but they had a hardback release date coming up at the end of February. So that is what I pre-ordered. I had some credit left over from that big Barnes & Noble sale. It was this whole thing where you bought stuff and then there was a discount, but then you got these bonus dollars for later and blah-de-da. Anyway, I had enough money to pre-order a couple of books. So Moon of the Turning Leaves is coming to me next week, a nice hardback copy, and I am real excited. I've tried not to read too much about it because I didn't want anything to be given away, but I know that it takes place 10 or 15 years after the events of this book, which have to do with a small community in Canada in the present time that is threatened by a sudden, mysterious breakdown of some kind where everything, electricity, all grid type things, electricity, phone, internet, everything just shuts down, and they don't really know why or what has happened, and they have to deal with several different kinds of threats. The threat of approaching winter, the threat of different strands of their community having different ideas about what to do collectively, different levels of preparedness, and threats from the outside world that begin to encroach into the village. And it was thin, it was suspenseful. I really loved it, and I've heard that the sequel is good, but I have avoided reading too much about it. But I'm looking forward to it very, very much. The other book that's coming out on February 27th is Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, and this is the much anticipated follow-up to Orange. I almost said Orange. Oh my gosh, I do not have my wits about me. There, his previous novel. This book, I think, does have some characters from that story, but it goes with them, but it also goes back in time. And it is about the Indian boarding schools, and it begins in the mid 1800s and comes up to the current day. And it's about uh, members of a family that progressively and in multiple generations have attended these schools that had a mission to obliterate Indian heritage, culture, religion, language, and just really decimated a lot of Native American families. And so that's what this is about these different members of a family over the generations who have gone through these schools and the survival of the family. So it sounds intense, it sounds difficult, but probably also very necessary. And when I read There, that was a book that I liked but didn't love. I can't even remember why. There was something about it. Maybe I didn't like the ending or something about the character development. But I remember thinking, this is a really good writer and I want to see what else he does. And now I'm going to get to see. The next one coming out on March 19th. This is probably the one that I am the most excited about of all, the whole thing. And that is the novel James by Percival Everett. I heard about this book coming out shortly after I had read The Trees. I think at that time Dr. No was already coming out, and it was already known that this was going to be his next novel. And I've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's finally almost here. It's already been reviewed in Kirkus. It has a Kirkus star. It sounds absolutely incredible. It is a reworking of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain from the perspective of Jim, the runaway slave who travels with Huck Finn down the Mississippi. And Jim, from what I read in that review, Jim is a person who's actually much more thoughtful, contemplative. He is literate. He's secretly literate. He is a reader and a thinker. All these things are undercover because they were illegal in the time that he lived in. So the character of Jim is just going to be so much deeper. I mean, I love Jim and Huckleberry Finn, but I know I'm going to love him even more now. I cannot even tell you how much I love Percival Everett. I think I've read 4 of his novels now. It started with The Trees when that was on the Booker list. I don't know how I was missing out on this author. He's not a new author. He's been around for decades, but somehow he just escaped my attention. Anyway, I can't wait for James. That's the other one that I pre-ordered with my bonus money. I found out while I was researching to make this video that on April 2nd, there is a new book coming out by Amor Towles. This is his first novel, Rules of Civility. I also have his other 2 novels, The Gentleman of Moscow, and The Lincoln Highway. My favorite one is The Lincoln Highway. This was a strong debut novel. It doesn't stick with me like the other ones, although I've always loved this cover so much. But I did enjoy it enough that I did go on to read his subsequent books. And from what I have read, Table for Two is a novella and some short stories set in this time period with some of these characters, which I think is an interesting idea. I'm very curious about this because I feel like his writing skills took an enormous leap in between Rules of Civility and A Gentleman in Moscow. So if we're going with his current level of writing ability, but back to this setting, that could be really awesome. I'm going to confess that I kind of wish it was a novel because I love how he structures his novels. But I love short stories too, so I'm definitely going to give it an opportunity and see what he has done with this collection. Then on May 7th, we have Colm Toibin's new novel, Long Island, and this is a follow-up to Brooklyn. This is about Eilish and her husband, Tony, and I don't know how far ahead of Brooklyn it is, but it's in their future, I guess, after, because in Brooklyn, Tony talks about how he's bought land in Long Island, and he and his brothers have this master plan to develop this, and that's something that he shares with her in that novel. So maybe this has happened. And so anyway, we're going to find out whatever happened to Eilish in this book, and I hope it's really good. I hope it's as good as Brooklyn. On July 2nd, Liz Moore has a new book, and it's called The God of the Woods. Liz Moore is an author. You know how sometimes people do that video called like the accidental author? I could do one about her because this is an author that I read books by her 3 different times and never realized that I had read other books by the same author. There's something about her name that just went completely generic on me. But I read Long Bright River was her most recent one, which is a mystery. But previously I also read Heft and what is the other one called? Something, The Unseen World, I think it was called. I'll double check. But they were all very, very different books. So nothing about any of them stood out to me as being, oh, I want to also read that. But you know what I did? I read The Unseen World, really loved it, looked up to see what else she wrote, found Heft, read Heft. Then it got up to Long Bright River, and I read that, and I loved it. And I thought, what else has this author written? And I look it up, and it's like, oh, I read 2 of her books already. Ding dong. So anyway, she has a new one. So I just have a blurb for this one. Early morning, August 1975. A camp counselor discovers an empty bunk. Its occupant, Barbara Van Laar, has gone missing. Barbara isn't just any 13-year-old. She's the daughter of the family that owns the summer camp and employs most of the region's residents. Well, of course she is. Barbara Van Laar. And this isn't the first time a Van Laar child has disappeared. Barbara's older brother similarly vanished 14 years ago, never to be found. As a panic search begins, a thrilling drama unfolds. Okay, so family secrets, town secrets, similar themes that maybe have been explored in other books, but I'll be interested to hear more about this as the release date gets closer. I do have some faith in this author to be able to write an original story, even if this premise sounds a little bit tried and true. On August 13th, we have a new book by Elizabeth Strout called Tell Me Everything. And all I know about this at this time is apparently the worlds of Lucy Barton and Olive Kitteridge will actually collide. They kind of already did, because when we left off with Lucy at Lucy by the Sea, she's living in Olive Kitteridge's town, and there already is some overlap. She's become friends with Bob Burgess, who was in previous books, and also especially the Burgess boys. But anyway, apparently Olive and Lucy may actually meet in this novel. So the Stroutiverse is coming together, overlapping, Venn diagramming. The diagram is diagramming. So I don't even know or care what this book is about. I will be purchasing and reading the new book by Elizabeth Strout. And then, last but not least on my list is Death at the Sign of the Rook by Kate Atkinson, which is going to be her 6th novel in the Jackson Brodie series. Again, Kate Atkinson is an automatic buy for me, and I have never regretted this decision, and I am counting on not regretting it this time. This picture and this title is giving me Agatha Christie vibes. I mean, I wonder if she's going to play with like a closed room format, which should be really interesting because usually her plots are very complicated and rely a lot on misconnections, coincidences. You didn't know this person was really that person. We see things that the characters don't. All this kind of stuff. Very, very layered and intricate plotting for her characters. So if they're all together in one space, I wonder what that's going to do. But I think she's a writer that likes to take different kinds of risks and plays around with formats and structures. She sometimes, these have been mystery novels that are fairly realistic, but she does veer a little bit into fantasy and magical realism and speculative fiction at times in other works. I'm not saying she's doing it here. I'm just curious about what she is going to do, and I'm looking forward to it. I will be buying it. It shalleth be mine. Okay, so that's what I have for right now. Let me know how you feel about any of these books or other ones that you know about coming up that you are laying in wait for. Laying in wait? Lying in wait? You can tell me that too. Anyway, I hope that you have a great weekend. I will be back on Tuesday for something not yet planned. Oh, you know what I think it's going to be? I think it's going to be, oh my gosh, it's going to be March TBR. Can you believe it? Have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, this is Editing Angelia. I completely left out one of the books that I am just absolutely consumed with excitement about. And I don't even have my papers in front of me anymore, but I think it was at the beginning of June, like June 2nd or something like that. Whatever's a really early Tuesday in June, and it is Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. It's a novel. I don't know what it's about, but I loved his collection of short stories so much. Night of the Living Rez, one of my favorite books of the year before last. Unless I hear the most horrific early reviews of this book, I'm definitely going to buy this because I have been, ever since I closed that book, I wanted to either start it over again or I was already thinking about what is he going to write next. If that's the debut, what's coming next? Because usually a debut short story collection is, sometimes that can be a mixed bag, but that book is so insanely fabulous. And so the fact that he wrote a novel, I don't know what it is about. I do not care what it's about. I am all in. I can't believe I left it out of my little lineup, but I did, but I'm fixing it now. So anyway, I think this is the new ending of the video. So have a great weekend and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.